So North Carolina, also the president has a lead, and we don't know how that'll shake out. They're being very slow. They probably won't have actual final numbers until next week sometime. And in Georgia, the number has been shrinking. The lead that the president had has been shrinking. We know Fulton County, Atlanta area, some of those numbers coming in, shrinking that lead, Biden catching up. We don't know how that turns out. But that's kind of what's going on right here. Again, if Biden were to get these two, he probably has 270. Right now, I want to bring in Newsmax Media CEO, and that's Chris Ruddy, to talk about thoughts on where the race is going. Chris, what are your thoughts right now?
I have a lot. I mean, it's you know, Bob, I think who would have thought this election, this could go on for weeks. This is not something that if the president, I did speak with the president yesterday, he seemed very resolved to fighting this. He thinks the election is being stolen. I think he has some belief that things have not been very fair to him in this process. And I think that basically nobody should call this election until all the votes are counted. And if he requests a recount in the key states where it's close, I think all the major media should wait, just as they waited in Bush versus Gore for the recount to be completed and all of the legal processes to be completed. There was no rush back then, if you recall, at least as far as the media was concerned.
Yeah.
And I'm of the camp that the president should fight it, especially if it's very close.
Yeah. Well, as you recall, in 2000, they did get it they got it wrong early because on election night, CNN went for Gore for Florida, which would have given him the election. Then they had to rescind it. And then Fox came out for Bush, and they had to rescind it. And then it took 5 weeks. And I think that was a slap on the hand. And what you're saying is essentially there's no hurry. We've got till January 20th or till the delegates meet on December 14th. Let's do this right.
Well, you know, I get a little suspicious. Newsmax called Florida. I think we were the first network to call Florida on election night.
This year,
and we did it based on really strong numbers, and we talked to a number of political experts on Florida, and the president was going to win that handily. He did. Fox News didn't call it. It took them maybe 2 hours to call it. But they called Arizona with only 14% of the vote. I heard there were people still waiting online to vote that were there late. And that election's now very close, maybe subject to a recount. There's certainly legal action. Why in the world would they call it so early? And what would be the purpose? I think there was a lot of media that wanted to give the sense that Trump was not having the big night everybody thought he was suddenly having. And, you know, there was states in contest out west, Arizona and Nevada. And they didn't want to have a lot of momentum for the president going across the country. Yeah. I guess that would be one way of looking at it. I can't prove to you that was the case. But I do think that there's a responsibility that the media has not to reach in making its projection.
Yeah. You know, by the way, I was talking about the calls that were rescinded. I was talking about in the year 2000. So it underscores the point you're making is the right one. It's like, we're not in a hurry. We've got time to make this happen and make sure it's done right.
And what's different, Bob, than the 2000 election was that, and unlike any other election that I know of in American history, this election had a huge number of mail-in ballots, largely due to the coronavirus. But it's also being pushed by a lot of liberal activists and progressives. It all started in the 2018 election. California, the Democrats have had a lot of success with mail-in ballots. I remember on the night of the 2018 election, there are 5 congressmen in Orange County. And those 5 congressmen all won on election night. In the following 2 weeks, they all lost with the mail-in ballots. And the way they do it in California, which is a lot different than the rest of the country, they mail out the ballot whether you request it or not. And in my mind, it opens up a terrible invitation for fraud and manipulation of the vote.
Yeah, and it goes beyond that, Chris. It also, you are allowed to ballot harvest there. I mean, you don't have to have a loved one turn it in. You and I could go out to people and say, I'll take your ballot, I'll turn it in for you.
And in some states, that's illegal. Some states it is. You know, people forget we actually have 50 elections, not one.
True.
And I think this time people are very concerned, the president was, about the mail-in ballots. Millions of ballots We're seeing a very high, like in Pennsylvania, you had a very high number of Democratic returns on those ballots, much higher than other states. So it makes a question, why? Was this organized better by the Democrats? Was it rigged, as the president might say? But I think that the president should look at every one of those. If a recount, they should look at the ballot and be allowed, if it doesn't have a postmark. In Pennsylvania, they got the Democratic Supreme Court to rule that if the signature doesn't match on the registration roll, they can still declare that ballot legal and acceptable. I think that's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think Trump's people should be able to go and segregate all these ballots out. And I bet you that he wins if they go through all the mail-in ballots. It just takes time.
Chris, what's it feel like at this point? You have built Newsmax as a brand, as a network, and you're just coming off record-breaking numbers on election night. You must feel pretty good about that.
Well, I'm worried about the country. I'm not glad that the media landscape is so bad that Newsmax as an upstart is sort of the lone wolf out there in some ways. I mean, I thought Fox was more of a comrade than an adversary. I'm disappointed on their coverage. I think the turning point in the election was Chris Wallace, that moderating that debate with Trump. I mean, the president, yeah, he interrupted. He did a number of things. But Chris Wallace was really, I felt, siding with Biden. And when Kristen Welker did the moderation on the second debate, I think she did a great job, and the president won that debate. And if you look at the exit poll data, it shows that most of the late voters, the people that decided in the last few days, 55% of them voted for Trump. And they didn't get a very good perspective on him. And I think Fox again, you know. So I think Newsmax, the Nielsen ratings came out. We had 3 million people tune in and watch Newsmax on election night. And Bob, that's a testament to our whole news team, including yourself, that they're coming now to Newsmax in such big numbers on cable, but also now on things like YouTube and Roku. And
yeah. Well, you're the smart
devices.
businessman. You understand how the business model is changing and why that's important. It's not just getting on cable, and I'm proud to be part of it, and I thank you.
Well, but Bob, if I'm a smart businessman, I'm going to definitely give you a raise. So
you're a brilliant businessman. So
okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I certainly see there's a market. There's a market in the country for people that are not getting fair news.
Yeah. That well put, and hopefully people give us an opportunity to earn their trust. And thank you for having me as part of it, and you being part of our program today on American Agenda. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We're appreciative of you being on, too.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.